it's wonderful talking to the students of Hansraj. I spent some wonderful years there between 1992 and 1995. Delhi University was a real learning experience for me, although back in the day, not attending class didn't mean you wouldn't get your admit cards. So I attended very few classes. But what I think Delhi University teaches you is it teaches you to get on, understand, and figure out the motivations of all sorts of people. Like everyone has different motivations, and Delhi University really exposes you to that. So enough about that. I'll tell you about my journey. I was a reporter, even when I was in my third year of college in Hansraj. I had already started working as a researcher for News Track, which was a news magazine with VHS tapes. It was a part of the India Today group. Today, it is a channel called India Today and Aaj Tak, but back then it was just one bulletin at night. But right from the time I started working in 95 to when I set up my own production house with my friend in 2000, I noticed the deterioration of news. And I had a view on it, that why is news deteriorating like this? Because economics mein hame padhaya jata hai that more competition, free markets means better allocation of resources, means better product for the consumer. And there is an overall upliftment of efficiency. But that is not what we observed in news. Aap log abhi bahut young hain, you did not see the evolution or the decay of news from the 80s, 90s to now 2021. It has been a very steady and alarming decay. And I used to wonder why is this happening? And we figured that the problem is that as post-liberalization, there were more and more products. It was a market-driven economy. There were a lot of advertisers, and advertisers go for eyeballs. And anywhere in the world, and it is not unique to India, Big Boss will have more viewers than 60 minutes. 1 hour news report on something that is urgent and important, like gender sensitivity, the kind of rapes that we see in various parts of the country, right to information, democracy at work, will have fewer viewers than Rakhi Sawant, Dolly Bindra going at each other. And that is the nature of people, and that is fine because we want to be entertained. So as long as news is dependent on advertisers, I figured there is no way that it can improve. Because like many of you have already seen that documentary, but we've been saying it since 2012, that when the public pays, the public is served. When advertisers pay, advertisers are served. And public is the product being served to the advertiser. कि हमारे पास 1 लाख भेड़ हैं, अब इन भेड़ के लिए आप अपना चारा advertise करें. So, but the problem was in the days of broadcast and print, there was no way, because the distribution systems had to be through newspaper vendors, through bookshops, newspaper shops, and through channels. But the internet gave us an opportunity that you could have a direct relationship with your consumer, which is the consumer of news, just like I'm dealing with you right now. So, but that is easier said than done, because there are 3 big challenges. One is people are used to paying for, are used to getting news for free. Why will they pay for it? 2, policy plays a big role in the success of any entrepreneurial venture. Government policy can make or break an enterprise. There is a reason certain gas manufacturers can do really well, certain can't. Government policy is a very important aspect, and in news especially so, because news is an extremely sensitive subject because it impacts governments around the world. So there was the policy, there was consumer behavior, there was ease of payment, because there's a 2-step authentication, OTP aega. Why will someone do all that pachra to get into, to read news? So there were a lot of temptations, when we started, increase your traffic 1 million kar do, 2 million kar do, put clickbaity stuff, then you will get advertising. Now I'll give you an idea. When we started Newslawn in 2012, the CPI or CPM rate, which you guys are, I don't know if you know, that's clicks per million or clicks per index, however you say it, the pre-roll ads or the Google ads that come. When we started on YouTube, it used to be between 350, 400 rupees per 1,000. Today, it's, I think, 12 or 15 rupees. So that logic was never going to work. You're going to have then, the kind of newspaper on news websites you see, the case of a rape, the case of, some harassment, the case of some corruption, the case of a murder. Beach may check out these, sexy pics put by XYZ. Like, why is that in the same category of news? But without that, you will not get the CPI, and therefore news gets compromised. So we stuck to our guns. We said we will not enable pre-roll or post-roll ads. We will not take Google ads because positioning the product is very important. The product, if you're trying to change consumer behavior, it's a very daunting task. I mean, if you're trying to get people who don't use hair oil to use hair oil, the one thing is not that you use hair oil and say, uska mat lo, mera lo. But one thing is, I don't use. You have to tell them, start using. So changing consumer behavior is an extremely, extremely daunting task. But nothing is, one should not look for instant gratification. And you guys are the generation of social media and you need instant gratification, but nothing comes that way. We stuck to our guns. We kept hammering the point. When the public pays, the public is served. Pay to keep news free. When the public pays, the public. And that hammering worked. First, we got a few hundred subscribers. Then we got, 1,000, 2,000. Then we moved on to 5,000. Now I think we probably have around 10,000 paying subscribers. And these people pay for news. They pay us because they believe our journalism is worth it. Conventionally, we are taught, we believe, and it is true, that freer markets and more competition leads to more efficient resource allocation and a better product. News is unique. There, the opposite has happened. As more competitors come, the quality of the product has gone down. And resource allocation now is more about get 5 people in a studio, get them to shout at each other. Those 2 hours you can monetize more effectively than sending someone across the country to really, do a report. And mind you, we have reporters when they go out. Sometimes they go for a story. Now, that story involves, let's say, someone who's been fooled or attacked or has been the victim of corruption. There is a person who indulged in corruption. You don't get anyone. Koi dar jata hai. They don't want to talk to you. Now your 2 reporters have traveled, paid air tickets. Suppose they've gone to Kerala. Matlab, the air ticket can be anything from 10,000 to 30,000. Stay there 3-4 days, probably 8 days. And you don't get the story. So the risk is a lot higher. And the risk is higher, but that story, even if you get the story, will have lower viewership than 5 people shouting at each other in the studio. So what is the incentive for people to do news for the sake of public service? Because news is in public interest. That is the point of news. Why is news called the 4th pillar of democracy? Constitution mein to nahi likha, kahin nahi likha. It is because democracy assumes that you make a choice. When you select your vote, it is an informed choice. If you know nothing, who are you going to choose? Or if you know only lies, what are you going to choose on? That is why news is considered the 4th pillar of democracy, because it informs the public. And when the informed public takes an informed decision, it is a better decision for governance. But if your public is not informed, or it is ill-informed, or worse still, it is misinformed, then how will democracy function? Which is why news is called the 4th pillar of democracy. And as long as news is funded by ads, it cannot be the 4th pillar of democracy, because it will always give you reality show and not ground reportage. And on that foundation, we said we have to get, and mind you, when I went to raise funds, and I mean, just on the side, I'm sure you guys have heard this from a lot of people, but it's completely true. There is no, like I said, everybody doesn't have the same motivation in life. Some people, work for money. Some people work for fame. Some people work for satisfaction. There are all sorts of people in the world. There is no one rule for anybody. Remember, one of my favorite books, Adventures in the Screen Trade, written by the screenwriter of Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. He says nobody knows anything because everybody's motivations are different. But if you really want to make something that is significant, money cannot be a motivation. It has to be to create something that changes the way people use, engage, or are introduced to any product or any experience. That has to be the foundation of why you're doing something, because there is something broken in the system. Let me fix it. And then if it has to come, it'll come. If it doesn't, but that has to be a motivation. And when I went to investors at that time, they said, no, ad model, no one is going to pay for news. Indians are not going to pay for news. Well, I tell them today, my Indians pay for news and they will happily pay for news. You just have to give them a reason to believe that is how news is going to grow. That is how it is going to prosper. And that is how democracy is going to stay informed. Because if democracy remains ill-informed, it will not remain a democracy for long. So the way to do that is, like I said, try to maintain a purity of your product, whatever it be. Like, many people say, why don't you enable Google ads? That is, you are not going down. But if I do that, it'll confuse my consumer. They'll say, ye bolta hai, ads nahi leta, lekin video se pehle to ads aa rahe hain. So you keep a product clean, you keep the messaging simple, and most of all, you have to really put your heart and passion into it. And there is no virtue in being a startup founder. There is as much worthwhile value addition that you do to the world as a manager, as someone who does a job, as someone who does anything. It is all the same. I mean, I go to, whenever I speak at tech colleges, they say, we all want to be founders. Koi tir nahi maar loge founder ban ke. You can just do as good a job as working for somebody. If you want to run your own shop, the most important thing you have to have is an emotional resilience and flexibility, because the battery it's like being dumped every month, sometimes by an investor, sometimes by policy, sometimes by your staff, sometimes by someone else, and you feel defeated. You feel, like that you get when you get dumped, when your heart sinks to the pin, you get that very regularly. So if you're not emotionally resilient, the emotional cost, you will become a horrible, bitter, angry person if you are an entrepreneur without the emotional resilience. So the most important part is emotional resilience and a passion to change something significant.